So Matt, you've worn multiple hats, both as a actual BCBA and now as a marketing agency for ABA groups. What sparked that big transition?
Yeah, ultimately, the transition came from realizing that marketing and ABA were really two sides of the same coin. Both were focused on behavior change, just the populations and the day-to-day tasks, the interventions used were more different. So when I was a clinic director and I was tasked with getting more clients through the door, I had to put on the marketing hat and kind of figure out a way to do it there. And that was really when I realized this is a similar process. It's a similar science. Let's see how far I can push this. And that's sort of the agency.
Matt, you talk a lot about ethical marketing in ABA, and I want to hear kind of from your perspective, what does that mean, right? What makes marketing ethical versus non-ethical in the ABA space?
In the ABA space, I think it comes down to truthfulness, right? Is the words that you're saying, is the methods you're using, communicating a story that is accurate and mirrors what the eventual consumer is going to experience. So, a big example of this is people who advertise no wait lists. But they, of course, do have a massive wait list, right? So I would consider that unethical. To push it even further, though, right? To me, ethical marketing and getting people to learn about your services. I think it's unethical not to market very well and not spread your services around. Because if you're one of the ABA providers that provides high quality and amazing services, good Lord, we need to hear more from you, not less. So we need to amplify because the reality is that other people are marketing one way or the other, whether you like it or not. And if you're somebody who can provide a really high value service, we need to hear more. We need to push you out there more. So I think it's unethical if you don't market enough, but I also think if you're not being truthful right there, that cuts off the marketing.
That makes complete sense. And I actually had a conversation with someone, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about how they don't think it's ethical for ABA agencies to not differentiate themselves, to not say what makes them different as a clinic, or as a provider, because that's what parents are looking for, right? They know a little bit, they understand some things, they know that they really need in clinic, or they really need in home, or they really need some specific subset of ABA services, and not talking about that differentiation. A, it doesn't serve you well, but B, it actually doesn't serve the client well, ultimately.
Yeah, and the story has to align with what's actually going to happen. I've noticed that oftentimes ABA, it's definitely hit with marketers. Like people are advertising to ABA business owners, obviously. But there's a lot of ABA business owners who aren't really aware of the broader marketing practices. So I sometimes see on LinkedIn or through Facebook posts content that I know for a fact doesn't align with the reality. Right. The story is being crafted, a marketer that's a great story, a great experience. But the reality is they're going to step into the doors of their first day of ABA therapy and experience something totally different, which is why I think marketing always has to be couched within clinical quality for me. I need to see the clinical quality and the outcomes for myself to want to amplify the noise that you're making. Because ultimately, if you're spreading a good service, if you're creating amazing outcomes, it's going to amplify your marketing tenfold.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's like that with any product or service out there, right? If you do a good job, then more people will hear about it, and it'll continue to grow. That makes complete sense. That makes complete sense. Um, I want to shift topics here. A lot of local providers really struggle with outreach and building local connections, building local referral networks. What's one of the biggest kind of myths that you've seen a lot of your clients believing before they start with you and doing your outreach services?
It's volume. It's volume and scale. As BCBAs, we're used to do one intervention, see big effect size. Marketing is the opposite. You still do your intervention, but you do it dozens and dozens and dozens of times. So I say, hey, let's do local outreach. It'll be a great way to get referrals. My client says, we already tried that. We sent out brochures to three pediatricians that didn't hear anything back. When you start explaining them the scale that's needed, the dozens upon dozens of leads, then the 3 to 4 at least follow-ups on multiple
Mm-hmm.
different touch points, when you introduce more of that marketing framework, local outreach becomes less of a convenient thing to do if you have some spare time and an essential part of your marketing strategy.
That makes complete sense. That makes complete sense, and I know that a lot of your clients have actually seen that, right? They actually see the real results, not just not just effort, but actual new patients in the door, new clients in the door. That makes complete sense.
Yeah, and it's great to see because it really restructures, I think, what marketing could look like long term for that clinic. I work with a lot of companies who have great SEO and they have great ad spend, but they see those budgets creeping up and up and up. And what's not creeping up is insurance reimbursement rates. It has stayed consistent in most places for up to 3 to 4 years now. And so, as our margins are getting tighter, it's more and more essential if you want to continue on and provide services for 10 years to have a lean and efficient business model. And that means looking at marketing and making sure that budget is at least maintaining, if not shrinking a little bit, as hopefully your clinical outcomes and referrals start to take over.
Makes complete sense. Makes complete sense. So a lot of people know you as the marketing guy for ABA groups, but I know you've also delivered thousands of CEUs before, and still have a number of different ventures and training and development for BCBAs. And what is one of those lessons that you've learned and that you've turned around and taught that keeps surprising people? Because I know you do a lot of this education.
Yeah. I think the majority of BCBAs, I think, discount how much information is needed to provide a really great outcome. Oftentimes, they come out of their grad program, they are able to provide one service really well. Think early intervention for language, right? However, the next kid who comes into your door is 70% of kids with autism have feeding disorders, right? Another, I'm sure, X amount of percent have severe behavior challenges. And so, as we stack up all the different challenges that behavior analysts have to be responsible to, it's important to not just become a generalist, but dive deep into a lot of different topics. So, I think the amount of information and the amount of continuing ed that actually happens after you pass the exam is underestimated.
Yeah, I'm sure it's an unpleasant surprise for a lot of people too, but it's just the
Yeah.
reality. The world is a big place, and there's a lot of problems.
Yeah, and it's tough. Our exam has, I believe, about a 70% pass rate.
Hmm.
And you compare that to SLP and OTs, which I believe, don't quote me, are like 85 to 90% pass rates, if not higher. So our exam is objectively harder than some of our peers, but it is the starting point. It is the beginning of the journey and the extensive continuing ed that's needed from research, from going to conferences, from going to online CEUs, and the frequency at which you have to continue to engage with the scientific literature, I think is overwhelming at the beginning. But once you get into a rhythm, you're going to be amazed at how good of a behavior analyst you become 1 year, 2 years after.
That makes complete sense. Makes complete sense. So back to marketing. If you could wave a magic wand and change how ABA companies market themselves, what would be the one big thing that you would change?
I think the big thing would be to demystify marketing as a whole. Demystify this like highly technical service that can only be provided by a couple different people for thousands of dollars. You look at like best practices for SEO. This is for Google business profiles. Best practices for local outreach. All of these things are very attainable to the small business to medium business owners. And you have great models in the big, massive business owners, right? You
Hmm.
go to a massive ABA company like InBloom ABA. It's a provider in Florida. I've worked with them as a clinician in the past. They have amazing local SEO. You know, they're in Jacksonville and they show up in all of my top results. Well, as an early provider, if I need to figure out how to build a local landing page, go check out InBloom or another large provider. So I think overall, I would say demystifying marketing to the point where people start trying it, start stepping into the ABA business space as a
Hmm.
business that's going to need marketing, because that's just going to help you scale infinitely better 2 to 3 years from now.
Makes complete sense. Makes complete sense.